We're back with another week on the Limitless Leadership Lounge as we get into the month of February here with another guest that Coach has brought along that actually we've both been introduced to by one of our local connections here, Nick Koziel, who's a phenomenal connector. So we want to thank Nick for the introduction. Coach, go ahead and introduce our guest today and let's talk some entrepreneurship.
Yeah, Raeanne Lacatena. Oh, I messed it up. Sorry about that. Raeanne is a certified professional coach who helps professionals and entrepreneurs actualize their highest selves and most fulfilling lives and businesses. Raeanne has been a coach to top advisors, managers, and leaders in the financial service industry for nearly 15 years, in addition to a variety of other industries. She's the author of two #1 international best-selling books endorsed by Tony Robbins, titled Cracking the Rich Code and The Integrated Entrepreneur, which I have in my hands and read, and it was a great read. She leverages her expertise as a licensed registered mental health counselor, Reiki master, and emotional freedom technique practitioner to help entrepreneurs to effectively identify what may be holding them back from achieving success. She provides tools and techniques to break through those barriers and helps them develop their greatest strengths. Her blend of business management, strategic planning skill, and a knack for unlocking an individual's potential have equipped her to guide clients towards success and contentment in various aspects of life, including relationships and finances. And Rayanne, it's a pleasure to have you. Welcome to the Limitless Leadership Lounge.
Thank you for having me, gentlemen. Happy to be here.
Excellent. So in your bio, you talked about, I know you work with a lot of entrepreneurs. So we're going to jump right in because we do have entrepreneurs that listen. We try to help young and emerging leaders and people starting a business is certainly in that area. So
Mhm.
what are two or three areas that are holding entrepreneurs back from being successful?
That's such an incredible question. And I see it in so many different ways. As a holistic business coach, I really like to think about the person who's running the business being one human being having lots of experiences. And so many business coaches that are out there will really focus on the strategy, the KPIs, the number, the revenue. They will have you set yourself up with the systems and processes, which is so important, of course, to the building of a business. But what I see time and time again is that the inner world of the entrepreneur is the greatest thing that holds them back. For example, if they have wavering commitment or dedication, then they're not necessarily going to get the results that they want. We hear a lot about side hustle or having a part-time gig. They'll get part-time and side hustle results if they're not fully committed and dedicated to what they want to build. Now, that doesn't mean you can't be successful by having a side hustle or a business that is emerging. It just means that energy, the internal energy of commitment and dedication to make this thing happen, there's a differentiator here. So if you don't believe fully that what you're going to bring into the world is going to make it, then you probably won't. It's less about how much time you spend on building the business. It's more about how much belief you have in yourself and what you're bringing into the marketplace that is the true differentiator of success. And that is why what I teach really is that business is a brilliantly disguised personal development plan. The more inner work we do, the more outer results that we have. We don't want to skip the steps of managing our internal belief systems, our confidence, our thoughts, our emotions, our behaviors. That work is actually more important, in my opinion, and my experience of working with emerging leaders straight through to multi-million, sometimes billion-dollar businesses, is that who you're being is more important in the process of building a business than what you're doing.
It's interesting given your background, as Coach mentioned, in mental health and counseling, also, in psychology, and how you talk about personal growth and how it really starts from within, even in entrepreneurship. How much overlap is there? Because we think of that maybe as two separate topics that, maybe we'll talk about mental health and psychology one day and entrepreneurship another day. But how much
Yeah.
overlap is there between the two?
It turns out entrepreneurs have a lot of mental health needs too, John.
Mhm.
Now, I am very protective of the mental health industry, and there is a difference between counseling and coaching. There is a lot of overlap in the way that we can teach some of these things, but there is certainly a difference between counseling and coaching. One of the major differences is that, even as a mental health therapist myself, who is trained and certified and licensed to provide therapy, I still refer clients out when they have a persistent, consistent, severe mental health disorder. And I always begin the work that I have with my clients talking about if I notice that that persistent, consistent mental health disorder or trauma reveals itself during our time together, and it happens to be that that disorder or trauma is the number one thing that's interrupting your success on entrepreneurship, I promise to tell you and either remove myself from the situation so that you can get the therapy that you need, because that is potentially the exact thing that you need to grow your business, or work alongside. More often, I will work alongside a therapist because I am not currently in the capacity of therapy. There's different work to be done when it comes to trauma and disordered thinking than there is for what we call in the biz the working well, right? Everybody is going to have grief when they build their business. Something is going to happen that they don't prefer, whether it be with a loved one, something in their business, or some other kind of loss. Every single human is going to experience grief in the building of their business, one way or another, whether it be personal relationship or the loss within the business. Everyone's going to have relationship issues when they're building their business. Everyone is going to have doubts when they're building their business. Those are appropriate for a trained professional to support someone in overcoming during the process of building your business. But there is, I see sometimes in the coaching industry, unfortunately, people using mental health principles without the appropriate training sometimes. And that, being very protective of the mental health world, that's a little hard for me to watch. And I do speak up often and liberally. And there is a fair bit of overlap when it comes to understanding that the inner world is a part of the driving force of the outer results.
Very good. Lorraine, let's dig into your book a little bit because and I always teach leaders that the first person you got to lead is yourself, and I
Right.
encourage them to get a personal mission statement and their values. And in your book that I read, The Integrated Entrepreneur, you had a really neat exercise on page 107 on values. Could you delve into that a little bit? Because I talk to people on how important it is to get your core values for yourself and then certainly
Mhm.
for your organization.
Yeah, sometimes if you teach this, Jim, then I'm sure you've seen it before. Sometimes people will assign and figure out their values because they think it's a step that they need to do, and then they'll check it off the list and they'll carry on with their day. But what values are really meant to be, there's a few psychographics or qualities that we want to mix in with the development of their values. And the first that I often see left out is non-negotiable attention to the values. So you want to think through what are those core essences of who I am as a human being, as a business owner, as a team, maybe even of my product of service? What are those pieces of you that are non-negotiable in how you're going to behave in the marketplace, how you're going to behave with clients, how you're going to behave with your team, how you're going to behave internally? Because so many people will create those values and then never look at them again, or maybe look at them once a year, or they'll put them on their website and that's the end of it. But instead, when you're truly living from a values perspective, these are the guardrails of our life. Easy way to think about this is decision making. When we are constantly put in front of lots of decisions as an entrepreneur, and when you have your values in place, they're guardrails. They help you make decisions. Is this decision that's in front of me in alignment with my values? So you can use them as a litmus test to go back to them and check and say, does this really align with my brand? Does this align with me as a human? Is this good for my team based on what I value? So they can help you in the process of making those incessant decisions in business ownership. They can help you figure out whether or not a client is a right fit for you or another business opportunity is a right fit for you. So they can be a real check-in on a regular basis for who you are and what you're looking to do. The other word that comes up for me is tolerate, which is a word that I've been really fascinated with recently. When you think about your values, you're thinking about what are you willing and not willing to tolerate in your life and business. And so it's this different energy that comes into the use of value development that I think is more important and often overlooked. Yes, we need to go through that exercise of figuring out what are those qualities, and we need to define them. We do need them on our website. We do need them checked in annually, but we also want to live within them, I would say is the most important piece.
Yeah, that's a great point. Because I always talk to, when we talked about our core values, what are the behaviors of those values? So well
Yeah.
said.
Yeah.
Hey, Rayanne, how about that entrepreneur who you've maybe worked with in the past who hasn't quite narrowed down their key selling proposition, right? Their uniqueness. Could you talk to that entrepreneur for a moment and talk about how important it is to narrow down to that specific target audience and be more self-aware of what value it is specifically that we provide?
So are you talking that this person hasn't necessarily found what product or service they want to bring to the world? They just know that they want to build a business?
No,
Is that
they
what?
have, maybe they have a bunch of different products or services that serve a bunch of
Ah.
different needs, but just aren't niched down enough. That seems to be a big problem with entrepreneurs.
Yeah, well, there are many schools of thoughts when it comes to niching, and I don't subscribe necessarily that you have to have a very narrow and specific niche in order to be successful. However, from my perspective, it's more important that you are super clear about who you are and who you're being and then matching that up to who you're serving. And so if that happens to be a very specific narrowed niche of opportunity, you're clear that this is the very specific type of person that you want to serve, or that this product is for this very specific type of person, then you need to have a niche. You need to be very clear and specific, and your messaging needs to match who you're calling to your business when it is in alignment with what you're looking to do personally. Conversely, if you have a product that serves more general masses, more and it matches with who you are internally, maybe you're an extrovert is a really easy example to understand. If you have boundless energy for connection and you want to serve a lot of people in a lot of different ways, it doesn't necessarily have to be an interruption of business to not niche. Have you found differently in your experience, John? Have you seen people struggle when they don't have a niche?
I think it depends on the industry, but I
Yeah.
think a lot of people think that more is better. So the more products or services I offer, the more the more potential business I could get, right? Because the more chances that I have.
I
So,
see.
in my
Yeah.
industry, oh, I do video production and audio production, and I host podcasts and do this and that.
Yeah.
And I think at times, and it may depend on the industry, but I think at times, if you just shoot to become number one in the world at one thing. I think that can be very powerful, and some entrepreneurs neglect that. But like you say, it may depend on the industry as well.
Yeah, I mean, as you can see from my bio that Jim shared, I tend to be a Jill of all trades. I have a lot of different offerings, and I've become masterful at some of them, but I also know my limits is really what it comes to. For example, I am a Reiki master, a certified Reiki master, but I don't use Reiki as the primary philosophy or principle of my teaching. I use it for myself, I use it for my own energy management, and I'll use it with clients when it's appropriate. But when someone wants regular, consistent Reiki, I refer them out. And so I think the more important point here is that focus is very important. And if you're the kind of person who's when you are diluting your focus in a lot of different worlds, you can't get anything done. That's a really good warning sign that things aren't going to work well in your business. But you have to know what are you willing to tolerate? What are your boundaries? What are your energy capacity? What is your time capacity? And that might shift and change as you grow in your business. So you do need to know when it's time to let something go and delegate it out. And you do need to know when is something that is draining your energy as opposed to gaining it. See, I love Reiki. It doesn't ever drain my energy, but I also know if someone else needs more of it, it is more important for them for me to refer it out. Does that help answer your question?
Yes, I think so. I think it's really about being self-aware, right? And is there
So
a
good.
time that you maybe worked with an entrepreneur? Do you have a story of maybe an entrepreneur who maybe lacked that, and then a transformation that happened when working with you, they were able to discover that?
Yeah, this story of it's if we're talking about the emerging leaders side of things, I think it is very common for people to collect different ways to help people. I can even share from my own experience as a mental health therapist early in my career. I had this social work mentality where I wanted to help everybody.
Mm.
And it's coming from a really genuine place where you want to help as many people as possible. But soon you have to discover that there are certain people that you just can't work with. There are certain types of people that are not a good fit. And so I started to learn. I began my career as a social worker and I did help a broad group of people. And then I learned, for example, that working with people with severe, persistent mental health disorders wasn't a good fit for me. Things like psychosis or things like persistent psychiatric needs. I wasn't going to pursue delivering medication. And so, why would I continue to pursue wanting to help everybody? So, it's this culling of what is a good fit for you as a human being in service to those that you serve. And eventually, that number of people that you serve gets smaller and smaller and smaller. And that can hurt sometimes when you have to let go of the idea that you can help everybody. I know I suffered that when I was young in my career. I was afraid to say, I don't work with people who have certain mental health disorders. That felt like a letting go that was a lack of service. It was painful for me. Eventually, I learned that the more focused I can be on the very specific person that I'm meant to serve, the better I am for those people. And the ones that are meant to serve those other people, they're out there too, and they're waiting for their clients, and they're going to better serve them because they have that unique ability, that skill set, that training that is important for them to serve. But it happens all the time with new business owners. They'll just, like you said, they'll collect, I want to do the video, the audio, the podcast, and eventually you start to narrow down. We call it chunking down in coaching, where we have a large umbrella of things that we do and we slowly chip away at it until we're very clear and we can chunk down into what our unique brilliance is.
Good.
Raeanne, I got to ask you because I've heard of Reiki, but I really don't know much, and I'm sure some of our listeners are curious. Can you just give us a quick little synopsis of what that is?
Yes, absolutely. It's a very common question. So, Reiki, if you imagine, let's think of a radio signal. That'll work well for you, John.
There
You're
you go.
you know all about that. So we understand that the radio signal exists in the world, but a lot of us don't understand how that radio signal, when we match it up to the dial, gets tuned in and we can hear different radios from different signals. So the energy frequency of the audio exists in the world, but we can't see it. Reiki is tuning into the radio signal of energy that exists in the world, specifically in other human beings. And so I have been taught, I have a radio dial where I can tune in to different people's energy with their permission. And I can send them healing energy, which is their own energy of love and healing through that radio signal. And so it's tuning into frequencies that other people can't see or feel and learning how to allocate them back towards their own healing internally. It's really fascinating. I gave my niece when she was about 5 years old. She was asking me what I was training in and what I was learning when I was engaging in my Reiki certification, and she asked me how to explain it to her. I held my hands over her hands and offered her some Reiki, and I asked her what it felt like, and she said, "Aunt Ray Ray, it feels like love."
Hmm.
And so really, it's directing loving, healing energy to people, but learning how to tune in specifically to that human being's energy needs.
There.
Excellent.
Yeah, well said. I think that's a powerful intersection then again between your background in psychology and your background in business and entrepreneurship. Was there an entrepreneur that you worked with who you saw some of that overlap where they were struggling maybe internally, but it was disguised as them struggling in business, and you were able to work with them through that process of helping them internally, and therefore by default also helping them succeed in business.
This is pretty much every entrepreneur that I work with, John.
Yeah.
This is why I do the work that I do, is that more often than not, the results that we see on the scoreboard of our business are really internal suffering that needs to shift. So I have hundreds, if not thousands, of stories at this point of people who are struggling in various ways. For example, I have one, this one would be interesting to you, Coach. I had one gentleman who was replaying, he was about 60-ish years old. He was replaying not being chosen on the baseball field when he was in middle school in his business over and over and over again for decades in his business. And so he was always the last one picked. He didn't belong. Other people were out to get him and bully him. And he lived this over and over again until we discovered that together in our coaching. And when we did some reprogramming, some healing. He was able to crack open and have the best business year of his life. And I see this stuff all the time. It may seem strange, but it is how the brain works. We're taught our identity very, very early, even in utero between 0 and 7 years old. And, the further away we get from that 7, the more locked and loaded our identity is. And so, very often, early childhood belief systems that are implanted into our brains and our bodies, they become a part of how we engage with the world. They become our biases, they become our self-belief, or lack thereof, our self-doubt. And so, we really do that. It's not all inner child work by any stretch of the imagination. But, here's another example. I had one client who was told in high school that he was really bad at taking tests. And so he failed the SEI, the 65, the 66, the 63 over and over and over again because he just was replaying this message that he had when he was in high school that he was a smart kid, but he was really bad at taking tests. And so it can show up in sneaky ways, but these things get implanted into our brains and bodies over time. And when we discover them and we have the tools, which I do, to help people unlock those mental beliefs and get beyond them, then we can start to move into a different way of being and experiencing.
Which leads me into, as you say that, one of my keys in leadership is effective communication. Can you delve into two things about communication? How a person communicates to themselves, and then how they communicate with others. Can you give us a couple ideas on both?
Yeah, let's start with how to communicate with others. One of the most effective, often overlooked, I'll give two, often overlooked skills that you can begin implementing immediately, which are so incredible. The first is called permission. There is something beautiful about asking someone's permission to share. So many people skip over this step. They will just launch into, your breath smells, right? They'll give some feedback or some kind of communication point to someone without any warning, without any notice, and without asking if the other person is open. The magical thing about permission is that I've never once asked permission and been told no. But it just gives this little moment for the other person to decide, and they get that beautiful permission of choice to say no. And then when we go into that communication, that feedback, even if it's tough communication and feedback, they know that they've given consent to receive whatever is about to come. Or maybe they'll say, you know what, I'm in the middle of the game right now, can't really speak to that. Or, hey, I'm in the middle of something at work. Can you send me an email with some times for us to go over that? And then the person can mentally, emotionally prepare for whatever is coming their way. So permission is one of the most underutilized, incredibly effective tools that can be game changers for communication with others. And then the other one, which you can use both for self and others, is intention. When we set an intention in combination with that permission, that's when beautiful communication happens. And by intention, I mean you share with the other person what the positive purpose for having this communication is. Why are we saying what we're about to say? Just to go back to that silly example, your breath smells, right? If you were to add something as simple as, I know you're about to go into this really important interview and I really know that this is important to you. I want to make sure that you're set up for success. Can I share with you some feedback right now that might be really important before you enter into that room? Here's a stick of gum, right? It just hits, it just hits differently when you slow down and you ask the permission and you set the positive intention that is for both of us to understand why we're saying what we're about to say. From a self perspective, when we set an intention of how we want to engage with our internal thought, it helps us to decide that same operative word of choice, how we want to engage with our thoughts. So if our intention is to have the happiest, healthiest, wealthiest year in 2025, we set that intention and we hold that intention, but then we notice thoughts that sound like you're not good enough, you don't have enough, you don't belong, you don't know anyone, you're not smart enough, all of these things that can come up in the process. We put it through that intention filter. Does I don't know enough fit with happiest, healthiest, wealthiest year? No. Okay. So if that's my intention, how can I shift this thought to be better aligned with the intention that I have for my thoughts, my emotions, and my actions for 2025 success? So that's an incredible way for you to begin using a filtering system about how you engage with your own thoughts, because thoughts happen. They pop up out of nowhere. You're like, where did that come from? And that thought, where I don't even know where that came from. Thoughts are emotional um reactions. They're chemical reactions that bubble up from bias, from past programming, from all kinds of things. And so sometimes they happen. We can't necessarily control which thoughts show up, but we can control whether we let them leave the train station and ride the through our entire life's journey. We can say no thank you to a thought that pops up and to choose a different one instead. And so that's really what intention helps us do in our internal thought process.
Very
Sounds
good.
like trust building too,
I
both
love
with
that.
your clients and with
Mhm.
yourself, because it's important to trust ourselves too. When it comes to counseling and coaching, building trust has got to be so important, I can imagine. And then in entrepreneur themselves, building trust with their own self has got to be important too. What are some of the ways that you encourage entrepreneurs to help build more trust, not only with others around them, but with themselves?
I love that so much. Yes, trust is one of the foundational ingredients for all things, as far as I'm concerned. And maybe I'm over exaggerating, but I'm not in my mind. In my opinion, it is one of the most important things that you can do in life and in business. Um, One thing that is really interesting to do, let's think of a referral, right? Like Nick, we mentioned him today. He referred me both to both of you gentlemen. And what I would call that is because Nick developed trust with me, he offered his surrogate trust to Jim and to John. You both know Nick and you know he's good people. And so when Nick says, Raeanne is good people, you have to meet her, there's a certain level of surrogate trust. It's borrowed trust that gets applied. Raeanne is at least someone that Nick said is good people. So we believe Nick, we're going to believe Raeanne is good people at the base of existence for right now, but we need to build onto that trust too. What can be useful is in an entrepreneurial setting is to verbalize that. Something to the tune of, I'm so grateful, Nick, for your introduction. And when you're in conversation with that other person, to be able to say, I know that I must have some surrogate trust as you were referred by Nick. I know I also have to earn more today too. And so it's acknowledging and verbalizing. We have a little bit of borrowed trust here, but also acknowledging that we have to work towards building more trust. That act in and of itself builds trust. To know that the other person is aware that we have a little bit of trust, but not enough trust to go deeply, especially if we're going into some of the subject matter that I go into with people, right? I don't do surface level KPIs. It's important, we do it, but I also go very deeply into neural programming and inner child work and trauma and belief systems. And so I need to have full trust with my clients in order to move forward. And so acknowledging that I have some, I want to work for more, that actually builds the foundation blocks of trust. Isn't that interesting?
Yeah, it really is interesting. Yeah, and so talk about are you aware of neuro linguistic programming? Is that one area that you also
Yeah, it
dive into
is. It
too?
is. It is something that I am aware of, but it is not my expertise by any
Got
stretch
it.
of the
Okay.
imagination. Yes, but there are ways to psychologically prime people with the
Yep.
words that you use and you choose in order to invite them into trust. It's almost like a linguistic hypnosis, if you
Yeah.
will.
Yep.
And I only know that by way of psychology, but there are certain ways to engage in language. Words matter, don't they? Words become matter. And so being careful about the words that we use is important.
Yeah, good point. Well, Rand, do you have maybe a story of a client, because I know as an entrepreneur, a lot of them want to build their business and to scale it, they've got to bring in people. They can't just do it by themselves if they want to scale. Is there anybody that you worked with that you gave them advice on how they can bring in the right people to help build their business?
Of course, yes. I mean, when we're thinking from an emerging leaders perspective, that is one of the most challenging parts of scaling your business is that you often what you'll see is that they will go the solopreneur route for a long time and they'll bump up this against the ceiling of complexity because they feel like they have to do everything themselves. But our brains are not made to be bookkeepers, salespeople, artists, creatives, digital tech geniuses. And so eventually, one of the exercises that I'll put people through, and it's really just whenever someone is ready to scale. And so I do have stories, but really what it comes down to is that people need to understand what drains their energy and what gains their energy. I'll think of one person in particular. She is a best-selling author. She's a producer in Hollywood, and what she came to me saying is that she's a creative, not an entrepreneur.
Mm,
And so all of those more masculine tendency, masculine energy tendency skills and abilities in business that are absolutely critical, things like the bookkeeping, the revenue, the KPIs, the numbers, the strategies, she resisted them as a creative because I create art. I write books. And so she didn't have the identity of the masculine side of things that you have to have in order to be successful in business. With that said, we get to, as entrepreneurs, we get to look at, okay, well, if bookkeeping drains you, is that one of the first things that you're going to delegate?
mm,
If accounting drains you, if taxes drain you, if tracking in your business drains you, that's a good way to release some of the stuff that no longer fits in your solopreneur experience. Those are some of the first things that we want to give away, in my opinion, so that it frees up more of that creative energy. But until you are willing to invest in yourself, you won't see the leverage, the lever pull of scalability in your business. And that can be one of the biggest things that people have to overcome is the scarcity and frankly just the math that you have to invest in yourself in order for your business to grow. And often investing in yourself looks like giving some of your business operations to someone else to do. What do you have to have in addition to a strong belief in your return on investment? Trust in the other people. There it is again. You have to trust that the other person can do this job better than you and can do it in a way that is going to protect you, that's going to keep your, for example, bookkeeping, giving. I see this over and over and over again with entrepreneurs. Entrepreneurs will hold on to those books until kingdom come because they don't want anyone to look at their numbers or to see what their numbers are doing, but they simultaneously hate doing the numbers and the bookkeeping. And so part of what we have to do is we have to figure out how do we find the right person that we do trust and what are those internal belief systems that are getting in the way of our ability to let go of what we no longer want to do in our business.
Well, it's all about protecting your energy for one thing,
Yes.
and then finding the right partners to help you preserve that energy and maximize that creative energy or whatever it is, that energy that you have the expertise in. And that just raises the question naturally, how do we do that? How do we make sure that we build trust with not only our clients, our customers, but also with those vendors who we outsource these things to? How do we find the right people? I know Coach talks a lot about getting the right people on the bus, right?
Yeah.
So when you're building your team around you, do you have some suggestions on how to make sure that these people are trustworthy?
Going back to something we spoke about earlier in the conversation today, that is another example of where values become the guardrails in our business.
mm,
If you are hiring from a values-based perspective, you're going to get a closer aligned hire than if you don't. And I learned this the hard way in building my
mm,
business. Sometimes what entrepreneurs will do is they'll try to find the smartest person in the room who does the thing that we want to delegate, that's the only thing that they'll look at, which is important. We need someone to be skilled at the thing we want to delegate out. What I've learned a couple of times in the process of building business, both with myself and other business owners, is that if you don't also match the smarts and the skills that you need to delegate with what you value as a business owner and as a human being, you end up getting into relationship and not a good fit land when it comes to hiring out. And so you can craft really, really interesting questions. This is a great one for ChatGPT or other AI to fold in to be able to say, here are my values. Please give me 5 open-ended, incredibly insightful questions that ask people to tell stories about the time that they were self-reliant or motivated or directed, whatever those values that you have are as a business owner, so that you can get them talking about when were already in that value system. And if someone can't answer, I don't really know at time that I was self-reliant, you might want to reconsider or at least put them further down on the list of possible hires, because those you can teach skills, but the human being that you're hiring is more important than anything at all, as far as I'm concerned.
Hmm.
You're smiling, Jim. Have you had this experience in your own business
Oh
building?
yeah, yeah. I mean, obviously, when I coached basketball for a long time, that talent is attractive, because you can tell right away, can this particular person play basketball well?
Yeah.
But sometimes it's just not the right fit, and it took me a while, but I got much better at it, and that's why I think our success level went even higher. So Rayanne, I got to drill down. I know this is probably not going to be an easy question because I know I read this book that the Integrated Entrepreneur again. But if you were to drill down into one important takeaway you would like the reader to learn from this book, what would it be?
We've sort of touched on it today, and it's because we've spoken about it in a couple of different angles. I think it'll make sense for the listener, but also remember that this takeaway is not typically the way people think. And I didn't realize this until I got out into the world. I thought everybody thought this way, but they don't. And that is, business is a brilliantly disguised personal development plan.
Mm,
The more internal work we do, the more external results we get.
mm,
That we truly, like, this exists also for the process of writing a book, frankly. Becoming an author was a brilliantly disguised personal development plan. I wrote 2 books this year, and the amount of growth that I had in 2024 was exponential growth because I was doing this work, internal work, while I was bringing these books into the world. The same thing with building a business. Business will show you all of your warts. It will show you all of your dramas and your traumas and your relationship issues. It will show you all your scarcity and your fears and your doubts and your worries, whether you like it or not. And so, if you instead subscribe to this, what I believe is a fact, and you become prepared with tools and ways of managing that truth, then you actually can exponentially grow your business. And this is where the fun happens, is that sometimes when I speak, I fear that people are thinking like, oh, that sounds like a lot of terrible hard work. I don't want to go and look at my inner world. I don't want to hold a mirror up in my face and see who I am. I don't want to look at my traumas and my dramas and my and my issues. Except that's the hard part. You're already in the hard part. You're in the part of the personal development where you're ignoring or not yet aware of who you truly are. The easy stuff comes on the other side of being aware. This is the weird mind shift that happens. The more aware you become, the more aligned your business is. The more you're willing to look at those warts and those hard parts, the more that the central nervous system is calmed down. Your beliefs are more in alignment with where you want to go. And so that exponentially increases the financial reward of building a business, the emotional, mental, and spiritual reward of building a business, the relational reward of building a business. And most of the business owners that come to me don't just want the financial piece. They also want legacy, impact, mission. And so that's how you unlock all of that greatness, is by being super clear and aware of who you are. Then the rewards come on the other side.
Clarity and personal development is everything in business, which I think a lot of our entrepreneurs, listeners might might be a little bit taken aback by because we may have hired business coaches, we may have hired sales coaches and tried all of the techniques. But what would you say, Rayanne, the benefit would be for somebody to hire a coach who not only for their business, but for their personal growth, really focuses on that side of things, not just the sales or the number crunching.
Yeah, and also the idea of strategy and framework. We see it in there too, John, that people will say, do the business in this one particular way, and you are sure to make millions, right? We
Cookie
see
cutter,
this
yeah.
all the time. And what I see is that it works for some of their customers because it just happens to be aligned with that human being. So
Yeah.
when someone pauses to do the clarity and authentic alignment work, they don't have to do it first. They can do it at the same time as building their business. But when they slow down enough to know thyself, then those they can better assess which strategies are going to fit for them. Instead of trying a million different strategies, failing over and over again because they weren't aligned. And then the belief system, I'm a failure, this isn't working, I don't know enough, only gets negatively reinforced in their brain over and over and over and over again. And so it can actually be detrimental to the belief system about self if we don't get clear about what actually will work for us. Some people get super lucky and they happen upon a strategy that does work for them, but that's only because it is something that works for their personality type and their business. More often than not, if you're seeing millions of sales on a website for one particular business framework, I would say this, I have no stats for this, but 90% of the time it's not going to work for those millions of sales for those small courses, either because people aren't opening the course or because it's not a fit. And so you actually save money by slowing down and doing this work and understanding yourself. You save money and you make more money. You get more time back and you have more joy because you've done the slowing down to speed up.
And I'm sure you learn a lot about yourself in the process. That's my final question to you, Ray, and I know Coach probably has one more as well, is what can clients who work with you or a similar coach like you who has the same focus, what can they learn not only to help grow their business, but also improve themselves as leaders and as entrepreneurs?
The other thing that I said earlier today is another belief system that I hold very, very close to my heart, and that is we are one human being having lots of experiences. And so the really cool thing about this is that everything that I teach for business is applicable to every category of our life. And that's what the integrated entrepreneur means is that we are one integrated human instead of I'm a business owner, I'm a spouse, I'm a partner, I'm a dog owner, I'm a mother, or whatever you are in these different compartments, that they're all locked and loaded into one experience. And so, if I were to use, I'm a mom, I have 3 kids under the age of 7. I often use some of the principles that I teach my business owners with my kids. And sometimes my
Yeah.
kids teach me things that I need to know for my business because I'm integrated as one human and open and aware to teaching from all areas. They become your little spiritual teachers because they'll show you your parts of yourself that you can then apply into your business as well. And so that's I'll call it borrowing. We can borrow something that we learn from one category of our life and very applicable to other categories of our life. And so the short answer to your question is that you can benefit in all ways when you do this work. It's it's niched, to use your word, to business owners. But the feedback that I get over and over and over again in this book, I see things in reviews online that say that one person even said, I wish it wasn't called the integrated entrepreneur because this is applicable to everything in life. Because it really can help you with your mental health, your emotional health, your spiritual health, and all the different ways that you are as a human being.
Very cool. Well, I have one final question, then I think John will wrap up and ask how our listeners can contact you. But my final question, before I say that, we really appreciate your insights today. We really enjoyed the interview. This is a macro question. I'm a guy that loves learning more about questions. So I heard this the other day, and I thought I'd ask you: is make the world a better place? And the question is this: what law would you implement that you would everybody would need to follow to make the world a better place?
Every human must engage in customer service, some kind of customer service early in their life to understand the value of relationships and and interactions in that way. I feel like when someone has an experience of taking care of someone else, whether it be server, retail, they're better human beings if they're taught well how to do that. There's a caveat to this law that there needs to be training on how to provide customer service. I don't know if you guys, I've been hearing this a lot in the conversations that I've been having is that the art of customer service is dying.
Mm.
And with the implementation of all these different technological pieces and AI, that even though we are so deeply available to so many people, we are getting further and further and further removed from true human connection. And I feel like there needs to be something in place that teaches us how to engage with the human essence of another human and to learn how to take care of them. I think that would be incredibly valuable.
I'll just say one thing. It's incredible you said that, and I really appreciate your answer because, and I'm not afraid to say this, is that I had my Facebook account hacked. And this is critical of Facebook. I could not get a hold of anybody to help me.
Yeah.
Here's this a multi-billion-dollar company, and it took me months. And not that Facebook's the end of the world. I didn't have an account for a while, but it just blows my mind with the point you made that the fact that you have a big organization where you can't get some help from a person. It's,
Yeah. Yeah.
it's
No, it's become the exception to get good customer service as
Mhm.
opposed to the rule. And that brings me, it makes me pause and it makes me concerned. And that is why I'm doing the work that I'm doing, is that I believe that entrepreneurs are the game changers, the rule breakers, the difference makers, that the world is on fire and we need a lot of help. And so the more people we can recruit to learn this work and to deliver it to as many people as possible, the better the world will be.
Yeah,
well
and it's
said.
all customer service. Every entrepreneur is serving some sort of customer base.
Yeah, even if they understood that single thing, I think the world would be better because I think some entrepreneurs are forgetting that
Mhm.
entrepreneurship is a people business
It
at
is.
the base.
Yeah.
Yeah, always. Yes. Rayanne, I know you have two great books. You also have coaching and you have opportunities for people to connect and learn more from you. What is the best way, and certainly links to your books are down in the show notes, but what are some of the best ways to get in touch and learn more about you?
I am the only Raeanne Lacatena in the world. So if you search, even if you can manage all those vowels, you will be able to find me. I'm at raeannelacatena.com. I'm at Raeanne Lacatena on LinkedIn, Instagram, and Facebook. I'm open to DMs, to emails, and you can certainly find my website and learn more about the coaching and book. You can also just get a copy of The Integrated Entrepreneur on Amazon.
Rayanne Lacatena and the Integrated Entrepreneur. That link to that book is down in the show notes and your website as well, RayanneLacatena.com. So
Thank
instead of trying to, spell it, be sure to just put that link in so you can get
you.
right
Yeah,
there directly.
it's a tricky
Rayanne,
one.
we learned a lot from you today, especially
Yeah.
for our entrepreneur listenerships. It's really a mindset shift for all of us to take, and I think it's definitely worth chewing on and thinking about. And if you like what you've heard from Rayanne, you're interested in more, definitely encourage you to reach out and find her. She's definitely a local. Brilliant mind when it comes to entrepreneurship, and we're honored to have the opportunity to pick your brain for almost an hour, Rayanne, today, and talk about that. So thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you for having me. It was a fun conversation.